Black history is often told through a narrow lens, focusing primarily on the transatlantic slave trade and African American experiences. But the truth is far richer, far broader, and far more inspiring. From the vast kingdoms of Africa to the bustling cities of Europe, from the islands of Oceania to the ancient ports of Asia, Black people have shaped the world in ways that are rarely highlighted in textbooks. Their stories are ones of resilience in the face of oppression, of creativity that influenced music, art, and literature, and of innovation that transformed societies across continents. Imagine African-descended communities thriving in places you may not expect. In the Pacific Islands, forging connections with indigenous peoples thousands of years ago. In Japan, where an African samurai fought alongside one of the nation's greatest warlords. In India, where African military leaders outwitted powerful empires. And in Europe, where Black scholars, musicians, and activists left an indelible mark on culture and politics. These stories challenge the common narratives, revealing a history that is global, interconnected, and full of achievements that inspire generations today. In this series, we will uncover the remarkable journeys of Black communities across the world, stories of triumph, resistance, and lasting cultural influence that you have probably never seen before. From forgotten leaders and brilliant innovators to communities that preserve their heritage against all odds, every tale adds a vibrant thread to the fabric of our shared history. If you are ready to discover a side of history that goes beyond what you have been taught, stick with us. Do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss these incredible stories. The world of Black history is vast, powerful, and awe-inspiring, and it is time for everyone to see it. Long before the arrival of European explorers and settlers, African-descended people had already made their way to the far reaches of the Pacific, leaving traces of their presence that are only now beginning to be fully understood. Genetic studies reveal that some of the earliest human migrations out of Africa passed through Asia and reached the lands of Australia and Melanesia, establishing connections with indigenous populations that would endure across millennia. Aboriginal Australians, along with communities in Papua New Guinea and other parts of Melanesia, carried inner markers that link them to these early African ancestors, offering a glimpse into a story of movement, adaptation, and cultural exchange that predates much of recorded history. These ancient connections remind us that human history is not confined to borders or continents, but is instead a vast, intertwined web of journeys and encounters. Centuries later, during the 19th and early 20th centuries, another chapter unfolded in the Pacific that was both tragic and transformative. The practice of blackbirding, coercive form of labor recruitment, brought tens of thousands of Melanesians, often referred to as Kanakas, to work on plantations in Australia and Fiji under brutal conditions. Many were deceived, kidnapped, or forced onto ships, transported across the sea to labor in sugarcane fields in Queensland or on cotton plantations. In Fiji, the work was grueling, the living conditions harsh, and disease, malnutrition, and abuse claimed countless lives. Despite being officially classified as indentured laborers, their experiences bore a striking resemblance to slavery, reflecting the broader systems of exploitation that shaped the Pacific during colonial expansion. Yet even in the face of such adversity, some laborers survived, adapted, and forged new lives, laying the foundations of communities that, while often overlooked in mainstream history, persist to this day. Their resilience ensured that their culture, traditions, and memories continue to influence future generations in these lands far from their ancestral homes. Beyond Australia and Fiji, African-descended laborers also left their mark in New Zealand and Papua New Guinea. In New Zealand, records indicate that African sailors and laborers were involved in early colonial industries, from whaling to trade, with some even establishing themselves as landowners despite facing systemic barriers. In Papua New Guinea, colonial powers such as the British and Germans brought African soldiers and laborers to assist with administrative and infrastructure projects, introducing new skills, ideas, and cultural elements into local communities. Over time, these individuals blended into society, leaving lasting traces of African ancestry that continue to be visible in certain populations today. The story of African-descended people in the Pacific is one of both displacement and endurance, of tragedy and triumph, revealing a history that has been largely hidden from view. These journeys across oceans and continents, whether through ancient migration or forced labor, reflect a shared theme: the ability to survive, adapt, and preserve identity under challenging circumstances. The communities that emerged from these migrations not only carried forward their ancestral heritage, but also contributed to the cultural richness of the Pacific. Influencing music, language, traditions, and ways of life that endure into the present. In uncovering these stories, we gain a more complete understanding of global Black history, one that stretches far beyond the familiar narratives of the Americas and Europe, revealing a world where resilience, connection, and creativity are threads woven across continents, oceans, and generations. As African-descended people made their way across the Pacific and established enduring connections with the peoples of Oceania, their influence was also taking root on the vast and diverse continent of Asia, leaving traces that challenge conventional narratives of history and reveal a world far more interconnected than often imagined. One of the most remarkable figures in this story is Yasuk, the African warrior who arrived in Japan in the late 16th century, likely as a servant or bodyguard accompanying Jesuit missionaries. Unlike most foreigners of the time, Yasuk's presence did not relegate him to the margins. Instead, his extraordinary physical strength, intelligence, and courage captured the attention of Oda Nobunaga, one of Japan's most powerful warlords. Nobunaga recognized Yasuk not as an outsider but as an equal capable of standing among samurai, a position traditionally reserved for those born into the warrior class. Yasuk trained in martial arts, mastered the weapons and strategies of the samurai, and fought alongside Nobunaga's forces during a period of intense civil conflict. His story is remarkable not only for the rarity of his status, but also because it exemplifies how African individuals could achieve influence and respect in societies far removed from their ancestral homelands, breaking the common perception that racial boundaries in historical Asia were absolute. In India, the legacy of African-descended people is no less extraordinary, exemplified by the life of Malik Umbar, an Ethiopian-born military strategist who rose from slavery to become a powerful and respected leader in the Ahmadnagar Sultanate during the 17th century. Umbar's strategic brilliance in organizing guerrilla warfare against the expansion of the Mughal Empire allowed him to defend his adopted homeland while earning a reputation as a skilled administrator and diplomat. He introduced innovative systems of governance and revenue collection, cultivated the arts, and left an enduring mark on the political landscape of the Deccan region. His achievements underscore the agency and impact of Africans in India, illustrating how individuals of African descent were able to navigate complex social hierarchies and profoundly shape the societies in which they lived. Beyond Japan and India, African-descended populations contributed to trade, military, and cultural exchanges across Southeast Asia, particularly in Indonesia and Malaysia, where Dutch and Portuguese colonial powers brought Africans as enslaved laborers, soldiers, and skilled workers. Over time, these individuals integrated into local communities, leaving enduring cultural imprints in music, language, and traditions. African maritime networks also connected with Chinese ports, facilitating exchanges of goods such as ivory and gold, demonstrating that Africa's engagement with Asia was not limited to colonial frameworks but spanned centuries of direct commerce and interaction. These connections highlight the depth and complexity of Black presence in Asia, revealing a history of mobility, resilience, and influence that transcends oceans and challenges simplified narratives of isolation or marginalization. The stories of Yusuf, Malik Ambar, and the countless other Africans who navigated the diverse landscapes of Asia remind us that Black history is not confined to any one continent or region. It is a global tapestry, woven through centuries of movement, adaptation, and innovation, where African-descended individuals forged new identities while leaving lasting legacies on the societies they encountered. Their contributions to military strategy, governance, trade, and culture demonstrate a remarkable capacity for influence and adaptation, enriching the histories of the lands they touched and connecting distant continents through shared human ingenuity and resilience. In uncovering these stories, we begin to see a fuller, more interconnected picture of Black history, one that stretches far beyond the familiar narratives of the Atlantic world and into the heart of Asia's rich and diverse past. While African-descended communities were making their mark across the Pacific and Asia, their influence in Europe was no less profound, stretching back centuries and leaving legacies that continue to shape culture, knowledge, and social movements today. One of the most significant chapters in this story is the period of Moorish rule in the Iberian Peninsula, where North African Muslim dynasties governed parts of Spain and Portugal from the 8th to the 15th century. Under the Moors, cities like Cordoba and Granada became epicenters of learning, attracting scholars, scientists, and artists from across the Mediterranean and the Middle East. They introduced advancements in medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and engineering, blending knowledge from African, Arab, and European traditions to create a flourishing intellectual culture that would influence Europe long after their political presence ended. The architectural marvels left behind, such as the Alhambra Palace with its intricate geometric designs and ornate carvings, remain vivid testaments to the creativity, skill, and vision of these African-descended rulers, while the infusion of Arabic and African vocabulary into Spanish and Portuguese reflects the deep and lasting cultural impact of their presence. The influence of Black individuals in Europe was not limited to the Moors. Across the continent, countless Africans left their mark on politics, music, and the fight for justice, often in ways that challenge prevailing social norms. In England, John Blank, a Black trumpeter at the court of Henry V, performed at royal ceremonies and tournaments, even petitioning the king for fair wages, a bold act of self-advocacy that illustrates the agency and recognition that some African-descended people could achieve despite the rigid hierarchies of Tudor society. His presence in historical records challenges the assumption that Black people in Europe were solely enslaved or marginalized, offering a glimpse of a more complex reality where talent, skill, and determination could earn respect and influence. Meanwhile, figures like Olaudah Equiano in Britain played a transformative role in the abolitionist movement. Having endured the horrors of enslavement, Equiano documented his experiences in his autobiography, providing a compelling first-hand account of the transatlantic slave trade that mobilized public opinion and contributed to the passage of the Slave Trade Act of 1807. His life illustrates how African-descended individuals were not only participants in European societies but also shapers of its moral and political conscience, using their voices and experiences to challenge injustice and advocate for systemic change. Across the arts, music, and intellectual circles, Black Europeans left traces that resonate even today, from celebrated musicians and composers to scholars and military leaders, demonstrating that their presence was both significant and multifaceted. Taken together, the stories of the Moors, John Blank, Olaudah Equiano, and countless others reveal that Black history in Europe is far richer and more influential than mainstream narratives often acknowledge. These individuals and communities contributed to the development of knowledge, culture, and social reform, weaving their influence into the fabric of European history. By examining these legacies, we see that Black history is not a peripheral story but a central, vibrant thread running through continents, connecting the intellectual achievements of the Moors, the resilience of individuals navigating Tudor courts, and the moral courage of abolitionists advocating for freedom and justice. Their enduring impact reminds us that European society, like all human societies, has been shaped by a multitude of voices and experiences, many of which have been overlooked but remain essential to understanding the true scope and depth of global Black history. Long before the transatlantic voyages and European colonization reshaped the world, Africa was home to powerful kingdoms whose influence stretched far beyond the continent, leaving legacies of governance, trade, architecture, and scholarship that continue to resonate globally. In the Nile Valley, ancient Egypt stood as a beacon of ingenuity and cultural sophistication, developing one of the earliest writing systems in hieroglyphics, advancing mathematics and engineering, and building monumental structures that still inspire awe today. Egyptian knowledge of irrigation transformed agriculture along the Nile, sustaining one of the longest-lasting civilizations in human history, while their innovations in medicine, astronomy, and literature laid foundational stones for future societies across the Mediterranean and beyond. Egypt's civilization demonstrates that African societies were centers of intellectual achievement long before European influence reshaped global narratives. Far to the west, the Mali Empire flourished under leaders like Mansa Musa, whose wealth and vision extended the empire's influence across North Africa and the Islamic world. Musa's legendary pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 was more than a religious journey. It was a demonstration of Mali's economic and cultural power. The caravan he led, stretching for miles with soldiers, officials, and attendants, distributed gold along the way, leaving an imprint on the cities he passed and attracting scholars, architects, and merchants to Mali cities, particularly Timbuktu, which became a renowned center of learning. There, institutions like the University of Sankore housed thousands of manuscripts covering medicine, law, astronomy, and philosophy, reflecting the depth of intellectual life in West Africa and illustrating that African societies were hubs of knowledge, trade, and culture long before European contact. Further south, Great Zimbabwe rose as a center of trade and architectural brilliance between the 11th and 15th centuries. Its massive stone walls, built without mortar, still stand as a testament to the ingenuity of its builders, while its strategic location along trade routes connecting southern Africa to the Swahili coast allowed it to engage in commerce with merchants from as far as China and the Middle East. Great Zimbabwe was not only a commercial hub but also a cultural and political center where governance, social cohesion, and artistic expression intertwined, reflecting a society that valued both order and creativity. Across Central and Western Africa, kingdoms like Lungo, Luba, and Neri developed governance systems that emphasized diplomacy, consensus, and cultural preservation over conquest. The rulers of Lungo, for example, leveraged robust economic networks and local trade in ivory, copper, and textiles to resist full participation in the transatlantic slave trade, safeguarding their sovereignty and cultural traditions despite the pressures of European expansion. Similarly, the Luba Empire maintained its history through sophisticated oral traditions, memory boards, and storytelling, ensuring that knowledge, leadership, and heritage were preserved even under the threat of colonization. In Neri, spiritual and political authority were intertwined, with leaders gaining influence through rituals and mediation. emphasizing justice and consensus over warfare. These systems of governance, commerce, and culture demonstrate that African kingdoms were not only resilient but innovative, capable of shaping societies internally and projecting influence externally. Taken together, the achievements of Egypt, Mali, Great Zimbabwe, Luongo, Luba, Neri, and countless other African civilizations challenge simplistic portrayals of pre-colonial Africa, revealing a continent rich with intellectual, cultural, and economic sophistication. Their legacies extend far beyond their geographic origins, influencing trade networks, scholarship, and cultural traditions around the world while resisting domination and preserving autonomy in the face of external pressures. These stories remind us that African history is not a backdrop to European narratives but a central force in shaping global history. Demonstrating resilience, ingenuity, and creativity that continue to inspire generations across continents. From the Caribbean to the Americas, the story of Black resilience is one of courage, ingenuity, and an unyielding pursuit of freedom. Enslaved and free Black communities faced unimaginable oppression, yet they found ways to resist, assert their humanity, and shape the societies around them. In Haiti, enslaved people rose against colonial rule in a revolutionary struggle that reshaped the world, creating the first independent Black republic and sending ripples of inspiration across the Americas. In Brazil, Palmares stood as a thriving stronghold for escaped enslaved Africans, maintaining self-governance, trade networks, and cultural practices for nearly a century despite repeated attacks. In Mexico, Gaspar Yanga led one of the first successful rebellions against Spanish colonial forces, founding a free settlement that would endure and gain official recognition, becoming a symbol of African resistance and ingenuity. In Canada, Afriqueville's Black loyalists built a self-sufficient community despite systemic racism, leaving a legacy of resilience and cultural pride that continues to echo through generations. These stories remind us that Black history is not only a chronicle of suffering, but also a testament to the courage and determination of those who fought for dignity and freedom in every corner of the world. Beyond acts of resistance, Black communities have enriched global culture in ways that continue to shape the world today. Music, from the rhythms of Afrobeat in Nigeria to jazz, blues, and rock in the United States, carried African traditions across oceans, influencing countless modern genres. Black linguistic contributions are embedded in languages worldwide, from Caribbean Creoles to British slang. While fashion, storytelling, and martial arts carry threads of African heritage across continents. In Brazil, practices like capoeira blend martial art with music and history, preserving centuries-old traditions that speak to creativity and resilience. Across the globe, African-derived cultural expressions continue to inspire new generations, reminding us that the influence of Black communities transcends borders and time. As we reflect on these histories, it becomes clear that Black history is not confined to textbooks or museum exhibits. It lives in the music we enjoy, the words we speak, the stories we share, and the communities that continue to thrive despite historical and ongoing challenges. It is a living testament to resilience, innovation, and creativity, demonstrating that the contributions of Black communities have shaped human civilization on a global scale. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Black history across continents. From the achievements of African kingdoms to the courage of resistance movements and the vibrant cultural legacies that connect us all. If you found this story inspiring and want to continue exploring the remarkable impact of Black communities around the world, do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Your support helps keep these important stories alive, and together we can celebrate the richness, diversity, and resilience of Black history.